Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. What's up, y'all? Elizabeth D'Alto here, your host for the Untamed the Wild Soul podcast. This is episode number 147, and today we are here with my dear friend, Terri Cole. There's a crass saying about breakups that the best way to get over someone is to get under someone else. That's certainly one way to go, and I can't say I haven't tried it in the past, but the route I chose after my most recent breakup was to zoom in on the experience and really look at how I co-created all the parts that made it ultimately not a good fit. It's humbling work, not always pleasant, but so worthwhile for the long term. And today's guest has played a pivotal role in that process with me. Terri Cole is a repeat guest. She is a fierce and loving friend, a brilliant therapist and coach, and someone with an abundance of wisdom and experience to share. She's super grounded, as her new tagline, "It's not magic, it's psychology," indicates. And we dove deep into really important topics that smart, highly driven, and achievement-oriented women and men should all be aware of in relationships. From our subconscious drivers and downloaded relationship blueprints to high-functioning codependency and gaslighting, this conversation is a big one. So listen more than once and pay attention for the parts that make you want to shut it off because they hit so close to home. We'll also be doing a follow-up webinar on January 11th to go even deeper and take Q&A too. The link to register for that call, as well as some extra resources Terri provided, are all in the show notes, and you can find all of it at untameyourself.com/episode-147. Enjoy this one. It's really, really good. You guys already heard me introduce Terri Cole. For those of you watching, you might be able to see I didn't put on very much makeup today because the likelihood of me not crying during this interview, I'm going to cry right now. I appreciate Terri Cole. Told ya, it's just happening. My podcast, I do what I want. I appreciate Terri Cole is one of the wise women, divine mentor, that friend, mama bear, auntie, just the frigging best. She's also someone, I just don't mind telling you, I don't know what I would have done without this person for the last several months of my life. So today, I'm going to stop crying eventually, and we're really going to get up in relationships. We're going to talk about, Terri has this amazing course coming called Real Love Revolution, and we're going to deconstruct some of the things that wreak havoc in relationships and everything like that. But before we get into all that, Terri, and while I take a moment to wipe off my face, I know you've been here before, and I know you've answered the question before, but that was literally 2 years ago. So tell us now, what do you love about being a woman?
So many things. So many things. Oh, I don't know. I love having my family. I don't know if that means being a woman, but I love being my husband's partner. I love having these kids that I inherited, no stretch marks, that all worked out for everybody. And now these grandbabies, it's like being a matriarch of this family is so, it's so delicious because we worked so hard to get to this place in our life that, your kids are good and that they're people that you would choose. It's just delicious. It makes me so happy. And then to have grandkids, which is so much fun because you get to not be the super responsible one. You just get to be hey, want to get your nails done? And they're yeah, it's just great.
That's awesome. And I like that you said people you would choose. And I feel like that's actually super relevant to everything we're planning on talking about today, because, some of the work, and I'll give people some context. For anyone who may be a new listener or a first time listener or doesn't know, it's now going to be January 2nd when this interview goes up. And back in September, I ended a long-term relationship. And my good friend Terri Cole, who's an amazing psychotherapist and coach, was so you and me are going to do some work on this because I see some stuff and I'm not going to let you repeat it. And it was awesome. It's been awesome. And one of the things that's come up a lot is like why we choose the partners we choose. And it is wild, like so many things that you don't necessarily see when you're right up in it. But when you're taking the time and space and hindsight to look at, you're like, wow, that was a 6-year-old making those choices in my case, or in like other people's cases, whatever it is. So here's where I want to start around this. Let's dive into that a little bit. In your experience, or even just based on what makes sense right now, what are some of the underlying reasons why people choose who they choose? I know there's a big difference between why we think we're choosing a partner and why we're actually choosing a partner. So let's start there.
All right, so let's make the distinction of the unconscious or subconscious things that will be informing or driving our decision. These, I call them downloaded blueprints.
Yeah.
Right? So these are downloaded. So right now we're talking about love and partnership. So downloaded love blueprints that were basically laid down in your childhood. And when you think about a blueprint, I call them blueprints because they're like blueprints for a house, let's say, that someone else designed. And hey, you may love that house. That may be awesome. And that's fine. Then you don't have much work to do. But you may actually hate the house. You may hate the design. You may not like the love blueprint that was handed down to you. You may not want to repeat that if it wasn't super high functioning, if it didn't bring a lot of joy, if there was a lot of pain. Because what happens in our early lives is that love and, let's say, pain or violence, if they go like this early on in life, what happens is that you have this imprint, you have this paradigm in your young mind unconsciously that in order for something to be love, it has to be painful because it went like this. So why we choose who we choose, I like to say that much of the time, if you haven't done a lot of work around this, the cracked pot will find the perfectly cracked lid to match. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a healthy match, a good match, or a functional match, or one that will make you happy. So there's ways that you can uncover and understand what's been driving your decision-making process. And once you do that by answering a bunch of empowered questions and things, I have all these like PDFs and stuff like that, like downloaded blueprint questions that people can answer, you start to see a pattern of your past lovers, your past relationships, and what are the similarities to either your parents' marriage or one of your parents. It doesn't have to be, it's not just one thing. It's all of these early childhood experiences impact what we think about everything. Right now, we happen to be talking about partnership. So we'll be specific to that. But we could also talk about your downloaded blueprint around health and wellness. We could talk about your downloaded blueprint around money. We could talk about your downloaded blueprint around career because we have them.
Yeah. And it's so super, super fascinating. I love doing this work. And here's the thing. There's probably 3 different types of people listening right now. They're single looking for a relationship. That is an amazing time to be exploring these things because you can be exploring these things and understanding them and then be knowing what to look for that is a healthy match for you and that might not be a healthy match for you. There are people who might already be in relationships and might be like, but I'm already here. What do I do? And then there are the people who are maybe have been 1 foot in, 1 foot out in a relationship for a while trying to decide. And what we're talking about, apply it to whatever is your situation because it goes for everybody. So one of the things that I didn't have really any understanding of before you and I started working together is how really deeply control. Someone's at my door and I'm not answering it. So they might ring the doorbell a couple more times. And
That's okay.
We'll just hear it. This is real life. So, and they could probably hear me talking and they're like, why isn't this person answering? Because I'm in the middle of a podcast interview. So, control and manipulation. How does it happen? How does it show up? We do it. We're susceptible to it because we want the person to be the way we want them to be. And they're not. It's so sticky.
Yes, it's the truth. I find that women, more than men, if I were to generalize, because of the way that we're socialized, we are very in touch with everything that's happening everywhere. So we are over functioning a lot. We are making sure we're the bridgers, the assuagers, the connectors, right? We want to make sure everyone has what they need. Everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Again, this is also a form of codependency, which is sort of interesting that it's a covert manipulation. So it may not look, it's certainly not honest. So it may not be direct, but that's really what it is, where you are trying to control what the other person is doing, how they're presenting themselves to the world, how they're acting in a social situation, what's happening in their career. Those are all about control, trying to assuage your anxiety by controlling, with quotes. If you're only listening, you can't see I'm making air quotes, because really we're not. It is manipulation, and it doesn't. A lot of time it doesn't work, and a lot of times it backfires because it makes you resentful that you feel responsible for this person.
Yeah, okay. And so that's something that I'll share from my experience. I know a lot of women can relate because I know my community. In a lot of ways, I've done that a lot in relationships where I am someone who is willing to take responsibility for my stuff, and I have a high capacity for doing so as well. And so if I'm partnered with someone who isn't taking responsibility for their stuff, it's almost like me going, no problem, let me carry all this for both of us.
Yep.
And then that's where the resentment comes in. That's where anger that may or may not be expressed is coming in. That's where maybe we do get into a little bit of victimhood. And you and I have talked about something which I think is so amazing. What happens when we get into this codependent dance is we feel disempowered, but we get to also feel superior.
Yes.
Because we think we know so much better. So how do we unwind that icky situation?
Well, part of it is when you start to become aware, and you know this, Elizabeth, because you and I have been talking about this, when you start to really become aware of your part in this dance and how you are 50% of it going forward, it's the satisfaction from the feeling superior lasts for like 2.2 seconds, and then it just feels bad. You're like, I'm just pissed, but yet I only have myself to blame because I am choosing to take responsibility for something that isn't mine, or for letting something slide that I shouldn't let slide, or for feeling guilty and feeling like because this person didn't have X, Y, and Z in their life, and I do have those things, that I should give it to them, or whatever it is. So I feel like that shifts when you really realize that you are 50% of every interaction in your life. Every one.
Yeah, it's tough to swallow too, because especially like whether you're a high performer, high achiever, really smart, which I know the people listening are one or all of those things.
Yeah.
You think you're better than this shit. You think it's not going to happen to me. I know better. I've been reading the books. I've been doing the work.
Yep.
But again, consciously you might. But because so much of this, like you said earlier, is happening from that unconscious blueprint. So again, like I'll share a little more context on mine. There was a 6-year-old. There was a real 6-year-old in there wanting like an adult to take care of her, because she took on a lot of responsibility and a lot of things were shared with her as a little kid that probably shouldn't have been shared with a little kid, that she didn't necessarily understand. So like literally she's just been picking out these partners for over a decade that felt familiar. And what's so fascinating to me that I learned from you is familiar isn't always good, right? Because like I grew up in a chaotic household. There was a lot of emotional turbulence. And so that felt like family to me. And so I would pick it.
Yep.
And it wasn't doing me any favors.
Nope. And the truth is, it was actually not what you wanted. Part of uncovering the downloaded blueprints around love and marriage and connectedness or whatever, just around relationships, is so that you can mindfully and consciously choose either to work on yourself and sort of not be in a relationship right now, or choose partners that are aligned with the actual outcome that you want. You don't consciously want to repeat a chaotic situation, right? So these are unconscious paradigms, like organization, the way the mind is organized unconsciously, and it becomes the default position. So instead of us sort of giving into the default position that will not get us what we want in life, we go, oh, I'm going to change the default. I don't need a default. I want everything that I'm doing in relationships to be conscious. I want to understand, oh, so here's the thing. This feels good and feels bad at the same time. Let's unpack which part of it feels good, which part of it feels bad. Because then you can start to connect the dots backwards to the original injuries or the original space that this familiarity was born.
Yeah.
And so in a way, one thing that I think could be helpful to listeners is that there's 3 questions that people can ask. There's something called transference, where you have a transference experience, which actually means directly that you're responding now how you're responding now to a situation is actually fueled from unresolved emotions from an earlier situation. So I find that if we haven't figured out our downloaded blueprints around love, we find ourselves in transference situations a lot, where this person, you're like, why am I relating to them like this? Or why? So the 3 questions that we ask is, who does this person remind me of right now? Why is this dynamic familiar to me? And where have I felt like this before?
Say them again.
Okay. I forgot what order I did them. It doesn't matter. Why is this behavior familiar to me? Like, why is this what this person is doing? Why is this for me? Who does this person remind me of the way they're being right now? Why is the dynamic familiar, and where have I felt like this before?
It's so huge. This alone, and so for people listening, this stuff is kind of scary. No one really wants to go, great, let me take a jackhammer to my life right now. But the thing is this, if it doesn't feel good, that confusion of like it feels good and it feels bad at the same time, this is when, women, and I learned this reading and studying Alison Armstrong stuff this year, like biologically, in a primal way, one of our biggest strengths is adaptability, because we had to survive. And so we're so good at adapting. That's how we find ourselves in situations that are unsafe or unhealthy, physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically, in whatever capacity that it is. And so, but once you throw in that you have a little like knowledge now because you've read books and conscious language, it's really easy to talk yourself into, this is something that I've done. And if I do it, the likelihood that some of you listening do this too is high. Oh, I should be more compassionate. I should be more loving. Let me forgive this person. We jump to the justification or the forgiveness or the compassion part, and we bypass or ignore that real inner truth and discernment that's going, this is not okay. We justify the red flag things. We take it on as a challenge, right? Like one of the things Terri and I worked on as well was taking on people as projects, right? This thing that a lot of women do, which is like we don't fall in love with the package right in front of us as is. We see the potential and we go, oh, I can work with this because it's so juicy. But damn, if I want to be working with something my whole friggin' life and not actually having my basic needs, not even my basic needs met, or in some cases signing myself up for really hairy emotional situations.
Yep. The thing about knowing what is your part, right? It's being really clear about what is our 50%.
Yep.
And this leads me to another concept, and you and I have certainly talked about this, but I feel like it's a really good one and it makes sense right here, which is understanding the secondary gain from staying stuck.
Yeah.
So how do we understand it? I'll briefly say the definition of secondary gain is exactly what it sounds like. Something that is not a primary gain, and it may be even counterintuitive. It may seem like, what is the gain? So how we figure it out, sometimes the secondary gain, different clients I've had with weight. So they're consciously and saying they want to lose weight, and then we come to find out that the secondary gain, what they're getting from not losing the weight, is they feel protected. They don't have to be vulnerable to put themselves out there because they're not dating until they quote unquote lose the weight, all that. So that's what secondary gain is. When you can understand, so the questions to identify secondary gain is, what do I get to not do, not feel, or not experience by staying stuck? And that could be staying stuck in this situation, a relationship. That could be staying in this work situation. That could be staying in a physical situation that is not pleasing you, if it is a weight thing or a wellness thing. But what do I get to not experience, not feel, right? What do I get to not feel by staying stuck? And those are really, really powerful questions that when you are stuck, you can just ask yourself when you're stuck in any place. And when you ask, it's really all about asking a better question. I find from a therapeutic point of view, the question is never, to me, why? Like, why? It's why? Like, actually, why? Because I'm interested, not because I'm judging, not because I'm making myself wrong, not because I need to make everyone else wrong. Simply becoming the observer without judgment is the path to your own liberation around these things. I always say to my clients, hey, I want you to get incredibly interested and curious about why you are the way you are. I want you to start to be able to observe yourself in a situation and go, not like, oh, wow, I did the wrong thing again, or look at you, you got all mad, you're an idiot. No. What happened right before I wanted to kill that guy in that meeting? Let me just look without judgment. What was I experiencing? What was the content of what was being said? Was there a precipitating event? Because the deeper you understand yourself, the more easily you can untangle or decode what is happening for you. And making yourself wrong and beating yourself up and being unkind to yourself is just another way of staying stuck. It's just like your mafia mind keeping you in the wrong place.
Did you call it
right?
the mafia mind?
I did.
What do you mean by mafia mind?
The part of your mind that is mean as hell to you. You could call it your inner mean girl, right?
I like mafia mind.
Well, your mafia mind is, think about the mafia, what we know about the mafia, let's say, which is that they're extorting money from people. Well, what does your mafia mind do? It extorts the joy from your life by making you feel like an asshole all the time, or making you feel like you're not good enough all the time.
Yeah.
Or you did the wrong thing, or ruminating about crap that's already over, or projecting fearfully into the future. All of that really just takes you out of this moment right here, right now, which is where your opportunity to gain this insight into yourself is only in this present moment.
Yeah. So what's so amazing is moving into that observer role, which, as you know, like, I've been able to do this in some major stuff that before I was just getting slung around, not even by, again, my mafia mind, but by that little 6-year-old who was like, friggin', I'm going to throw a temper tantrum until you start paying attention and taking care of me, goddammit. So, you know, and you listening, maybe it's a 2-year-old, maybe it's a 13-year-old, maybe that's not the thing that's relevant for you. Maybe it's you right now who's just like finally so fed up. But whatever it is, being able to observe, actually, I find, feels like it slows down the present moment. It makes available for me a pause where I can see it and go, oh, I see it. The music has started to play. And this is usually the part where I take my step forward, but I don't do that anymore. And I think a lot of this is getting to that place of, oh, I don't do that anymore. And actually being able to choose not to do it. And what I have found, so for those of you listening who might decide to go deeper into Terri's work. You might even decide to take her Real Love Revolution course, which I'm freaking pumped for. Is then we get to see as we go that, yeah, sometimes you're still going to stumble. Sometimes you're still going to take the step, but you'll notice it sooner and be like, oh, and you can eject yourself from the dance floor right in the middle of the song. You don't have to finish the song. You don't have to finish the dance. And this comes with, again, like the awareness, the self-knowledge. And so I know you and I have talked about this too, but how it's not just the awareness and it's not just the knowledge. You kind of need it all to work together so that you could start doing things differently. Because ultimately this is about doing things differently. Because it's cool if you could talk about it. It's cool if you could see it. It's cool if you get it. But if you're still doing the same shit over and over again.
Yep.
That's the next part.
Right. So the question is, how willing are you to change? Because it requires a change. And what Elizabeth was referring to before, because we always talk about relationships as a dance, and that the other person really wants you to keep doing the dance. So when you try to change something, there's a brilliant PhD named Dr. Harriet Lerner, who has a whole bunch of books out. And she has a book called The Dance of Anger, and then The Dance of Deception, The Dance of Intimacy. And she talks about, she's the first person who I ever read who referred to relationships as this dance. And when you try to change, your partner does what she calls a change back move. So they will jack up the hysteria. They will overreact to something to like suck you back into that dance floor because they don't want you doing something different, because it threatens them, because they're afraid to lose you, because they're afraid if something changes, then you guys aren't going to make it, or whatever their fear is, you know? So in deciding that you're not going to do the dance, that is the ultimate of what the understanding, as you were saying. You can feel it, you can see it, and you can comprehend it. And the next step is actually changing the behavior. And even if what Elizabeth said before is so perfectly true, that it happens faster and faster. So it isn't like we have these realizations and then we do something different and then we're like perfect. We do something different. We step forward 2 steps, and then we step backwards 3 steps, and then we go forward again. And so the therapeutic process itself is really going forward and going backwards, more forward than backward. But there's no perfection when it comes to this. So it's okay if you promised yourself you were not going to respond to that person's text anymore, and then you do in a weak moment at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep, or maybe you're drunk, or who knows why you do it. That doesn't mean that all of the progress that you made is lost. Forgive yourself and just go forward with the new behavior, and understand that it is a process. Changing is a process. It isn't just there's no just perfection, you know?
Yeah. You're acclimating. And I don't remember if it was you that told me this or somebody else, but when people climb Mount Everest, first of all, they train for it. And then when they go, because of the altitude, they actually have to climb to base camp 1 and then go back down. And then pass base camp 1 to base camp 2, and then go back down to base camp 1, and then go to base camp 3 and go back to base camp 2. So it's actually intentionally forward and back because you are becoming acclimated, and behavior change is similar. Like you're those steps back, I mean, in Mount Everest, they're doing it on purpose because they understand how it works. Us humans just trying to get through relating to our friends, family, coworkers, and romantic partners and children, we might not be doing it on purpose all the time, but it's the same thing. We're getting acclimated. So the gentleness is important. Quick break in the show to remind anyone who is interested and has not already applied that I am still taking applications for my 9-month mentorship program, Emerge, through January 11th, 2017. The program starts January 12th officially, and everything you need to know can be found at untameyourself.com/emerge. All of the details, what's entailed in the program, how it's going to work, who it's for. There's also a full-length info and Q&A call if you want to know a bit more about the specific curriculum, the outcomes, the expectations, the results, and the goals that you could look forward to or that you could bring to the program. If you're looking for someone to guide you through 2017, maybe being the best year you've ever had in your life. So head on over to untameyourself.com/emerge if you're interested, and back to the show. So something you were saying during that, as we do start to behavior change in our relationship, we start to notice things. All right, cool, we're doing the dance. I'm not doing that dance anymore. You could take the step. I'm not taking the step. You start to feel like a rock star. You said the person, whoever it is, might ramp up whatever is their behavior that typically is their dance step, to stay in the analogy, that hooks you. Now, some of them, it might be hysteria, it might be drama, it might be yelling. But you and I have talked about a lot of the more subtle forms of manipulation that people use. In our last interview, I remember you and I talked about passive-aggressive anger, so we don't need to go there. But this concept called gaslighting. Can you tell us what that is?
Sure.
Because women bring it up in my community all the time. I've personally seen it and experienced in different contexts in my life, and it's so tricky. But once you hear Terri tell you what this is, you won't be able to unhear it, and you'll automatically be less susceptible to it.
Right. So gaslighting is when one partner is basically denying the other partner's reality. So let just quick examples. You have a conversation with your partner about going to your grandmother's birthday party on Saturday, and they say to you on Friday, when you say, okay, so tomorrow we have to be whatever, they say, what are you talking about? We never talked about this. I have plans tomorrow. I can't go to grandma's thing. What are you talking about? That never happened. Wow, you're making me scared. Like, I'm nervous for you right now. The fact that you think we had this conversation that we did not have. Like that. So what happens is called the gaslight effect. That can happen actually over time, gradually, that you get into your own, it's sort of like the gaslight dance or the gaslight tango, I guess we could call it, where you're doing it with your partner, that you're not the same person that you used to be. Somebody doing this to you over time can really, it really scratches away at your self-esteem, and your ego functioning actually gets compromised because you're kind of not certain any longer of your own reality, right? It's like you can't, now you feel like you can't identify when something's off. And because this person has been beating you down with this, it's like you just give it up to them when they say it didn't happen or it did happen or whatever. You're like, well, obviously, I don't know what is going on. So it's all of this way to give yourself, like, feel insecure about yourself. So you first have like disbelief, like that this person wouldn't do this to you. You know, it's like that was just a moment in time. Like you don't want to believe that somebody would do this to you purposely. It doesn't have to be your partner. It could be your boss. It could be a friend. It could be a family member, right? It's just like weird. So moving on from that, it's like you get into the fact that it's really not an isolated event and that it's happening more often, where then you move into the next phase, which is like defending yourself. Like you're like, I know you're doing this. Like I see what you're doing, but they still will deny that they'll still either blame you or deny it.
Well,
right?
Yeah. So let me ask a question here, though, because I don't believe a lot of people, I don't think they know they're doing it. I think for some people, it's like literally their defense mechanism to protect their own version of reality, which in some cases is highly distorted. So I've experienced this before in the form of being blamed for somebody else's lack of drive or success. Like I've been told, like, I don't think you want me to succeed. And I'm like, what? Like, you succeeding would actually make my life so much easier. Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I don't know if that's gaslighting or what you called earlier transference or straight up projection, all the psychological terms. But the bottom line is, either way, when someone is trying to put their stuff on you so that they don't have to take responsibility for it, and that it's just, they get some relief of the discomfort of their own existence or struggles and challenges or whatever, this is when it becomes important, like you're saying here, to know what's actually happening and what's actually real for you.
Right. So how can you let's just help listeners figure out how they can, maybe they're in this situation
Yeah.
and they're questioning themselves, because the third part of that experience is like falling into depression, where that you don't feel that joyful about things because it's like you're in a double bind. You can't win for losing. It doesn't matter what you do. You still feel like you don't, somehow you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So let's think about in relationships, if you're constantly second guessing yourself, that's one sign. If you are, ask yourself, like, 10 times a day, am I too sensitive? Because that's another thing that someone who's gaslighting
Totally.
you is always saying is you're too sensitive. You often feel confused or even crazy, whether, let's say, it's a work situation, like just being like, you don't get what's going on. Always find yourself apologizing to whomever it is. Could be your mother, father, boyfriend, boss, whomever, but you're always saying, can't understand why, with so many apparently good things in your life, you're not happier.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another thing, that the outside looks great, but you're having this inner turmoil,
Mm-hmm.
right? Making excuses for your partner's behavior, feeling like you have to do that, because again, that's when the partner is kind of the one who is gaslighting you. Find yourself withholding information from your friends and family about your partner, so you don't have to explain yourself.
That's something that's so funny. I think back to more stubborn years of my life when my parents would see it and they'd like call it out, and I'd like try to explain it away.
Yep.
And then I would just start not telling them things. And what's hilarious is with the dawning of Facebook, they would be able to see things that I didn't tell them, but like if they were friends with my partner or whatever,
Yep.
and they'd be like, what, like, are you kidding me right now? It's so funny. Yep. It's so funny. I even had an experience once of, after I ended a relationship, my mom telling me like, yeah, your little brother recently told me he feels like you're back. And I'm like, well, I kind of was in a weird vortex there for a while. So that makes sense. And it's, sometimes it might feel frustrating, like the people around you are like, they don't support you or whatever, but sometimes they're just seeing what you're not seeing.
Uh-huh. Right. And that's another one of the whole gaslighting things. You know that you're sort of being gaslit by someone if you feel like you have to make excuses to your friends and family and taking responsibility for the other person, right?
Yeah.
And you just feel like you can't do anything right. You feel like you're joyless and hopeless.
Yeah.
These are all sort of indications, and really not feeling good enough. You just don't feel like a good enough employee or good enough girlfriend or whatever. Those are all things that when someone is denying your reality, and this happens to kids as well. I don't know if I would call it gaslighting or a family in denial, right? But if in a family, let's say that there's infidelity or there's addiction and the kid knows it, but nobody is talking about it. So if you have a situation where there's a lot of alcoholism in the family, and then, there's a horrendous experience the night before, and you wake up the next day, and then everyone's like, hey, good morning, like normal, like it didn't happen. This is, again, how does that impact a child? The kid is like, well, I can't really trust my reality because obviously everyone else thinks everything is fine. Why am I the only person traumatized? I guess it's fine. Or sensing that someone's being unfaithful or something else is going on, and then asking someone about it and having a parent say that isn't true, that didn't happen, and then the kid being like, well, of course not, because I'm insane.
Right. And this leads us back to what we were saying earlier about these downloaded blueprints, because again, we're not having this conversation so that you can look back on all the relationships you've ever been in or on the relationship you're in right now and point fingers and be like, this mofo's gaslighting me or that person did this. Yep. Because you, like Terri said, you're 50%, like you attracted it. Something in you needed that, wanted it, asked for it. I know that's very confronting for people because it's like the counterintuitive thing, like Terri said earlier, like why the hell would I want this? Because it's what you knew. So that point you just made is so huge, because one of the reasons why one of the most important things I teach is courageous conversations and communication is because so many people grew up in households where things just got swept under the rug. So what you're saying here makes so much sense, because when you're young and you don't understand that everyone else is just trying to you don't get till you're an adult that being an adult is freaking hard.
Right. Totally.
And then you realize like, oh, they were literally doing their best. They were just trying to survive and hold it together. But at the time you take on I must be crazy because these people are acting like everything's fine. And I just thought it wasn't. So it must be.
Right. And you have to undo that. And how do we undo that? By unpacking those original injuries and having empathy for our child inside of us, having compassion. And then eventually we get to having compassion for the flawed humans who raised us. I mean, they're all flawed. This is just life in general. I don't think, again, speaking of not doing a spiritual bypass, there has to be a time frame where when you start to really realize what happened in the family that you grew up in, that you give yourself a moment to be pissed. You don't have to take it out on your parents. You don't even have to friggin' tell them. But the grown-up you so wants to co-opt it and be like, whatever, that was decades ago. Shut up. Why are we still talking about this? Like, there has to be an honoring of the fact that our parents, pretty much, unless you were raised by, I don't know who, like, I don't know whose parents didn't fail them. And as a parent, I'm positive I failed my children. So, and as a good parent, all I can be is sorry for the ways that I failed them. And not say, hey, I did the best I could and give an excuse. Ask each one of them, which I've done, for their forgiveness. Because I know that I failed them. And I am sorry. And I love them deeply as well. And I believe that their generous hearts have forgiven me, Vic and I both, for the ways that we've failed them. But there's something so important to a kid. If your parents are, evolved enough to be sorry about it, great, let them be. And if not, you have to at least give yourself permission to be angry. You did get screwed because we all got screwed. So the 6-year-old in you is pissed. And you know what? She has a right to be pissed. Yeah. Now, she doesn't have to be pissed forever. And if you honor how she feels and make changes, she won't be pissed forever.
Totally.
And if you don't, she will be.
She'll keep calling the shots. So I love that you're actually saying that. Just last week, the podcast interview was Philip McKernan. Have you ever heard him or heard of him or met him? Awesome dude. And one of the things, he made this connection that I've never made before. He said that unexpressed or repressed anger is one of the biggest blocks to accessing our intuition.
Oh.
And I was like, damn. And it's so true. And I think, people on the show have heard me say this before. I think you and I have even talked about this on the show before, is that women especially, I think it's more culturally, socially acceptable for us to be sad than to be angry. And so a lot of them will avoid anger. And if you don't connect with that anger, it's literally like, and again, wherever the root is, wherever it comes from, maybe there's a 6-year-old wielding the anger in your body, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. If you don't access it, if you don't unpack it, it's calling some shots in your life, whether you like it or not. So I want to shift into, I want to really make sure that we define this for people. And again, kind of look at it from the, what's my part? Why did I attract this? How do I spot it? Mm-hmm. Tell us exactly what codependency is. And you and I, let's tell us what it is in general, but then you and I specifically are going to jam on what we call high functioning codependency. And then for those listening, I just want you to know, if you're like really digging this conversation, Terri and I are doing a webinar together on January 11th at 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern. You can register for that webinar. We're going to get even deeper into this stuff because this could be a 3-hour interview. This stuff is so deep and so important. But obviously we keep the show to about, 45 minutes to an hour. But you can go to untameyourself.com/real love-webinar and register for that. Okay. And we'll put that in the show notes too. This is episode, I have it on my calendar, episode number 147. So untameyourself.com/episode-147 to find all the links and everything that we've already mentioned. So codependency, what's the simple definition?
Simple definition is codependent. When you are codependent, when it's you feel you're very preoccupied with your partner and everything that's happening to them feels like it's happening to you. You feel overly responsible for them in the world. You are you're endlessly trying to control them, even if you're doing it mostly in a manipulative way, passively, aggressively. But you feel like what's happening to them is happening to you. Like that's sort of the lack of separation between the two is a really good definer of being codependent.
And then what is the high functioning codependency? So let's do this in example form. In the simple forms, the codependency might look like you're pissed off at someone, I'm pissed off at them too. What other examples are there of like the regular good old fashioned codependency?
Well, somebody not being well enough to go to work because they're drunk or something, and you taking that on and calling their boss and making up a lie for them. Somebody needing to, trying to pass some kind of test, and you spending hours and hours with them trying to help them get ready to do that. Someone like where they expect you to be like the solution to their problems, not just part of the solution, as we can do in partnerships, more like actually the solution.
Yeah.
What I think distinguishes codependency from high functioning codependency is that the demographic, certainly the women who are, my audience and my people are definitely high functioning women. So they don't identify with the codependent label, right? Because that sounds like weakness. And because they're so high functioning and can get so much done, that who they choose, right? It a lot of times too isn't just like your basic average like heroin addict or drunk, right? Because a lot of times with codependency, a lot of Melody Beattie's work is all around, codependent no more. So much of the time it's the enabler trying to control the addict, right? That's what originally 70s and 80s codependency, that's basically how it was always framed. But there's such a broader definition that we're talking about now. So with high functioning women, everything is elevated, right? My audience is so smart that they intellectualize away what is happening, which is a very high functioning defense of intellectualization.
You guys, this was me. I could friggin' intellectualize this shit all day. Nor did I want to take on the label like you said. I'm like, that's weak shit. I don't do that. Oh my God. I was doing it well.
Totally.
Sophisticated is what it is. It becomes sophisticated.
And you also get to, because you're going back and forth with this person, let's go back to the feeling superior thing that we started the podcast with.
Yeah.
That it lets you feel like, he needs me. He needs me or she needs me. Like I'm doing this because they can't live without me. Do you know what I mean? And feeling like, well, I'm right, but whatever. I'll still save them.
Yeah. And also the like, I know better, right? And I see this a lot. I see this a lot with women who are doing their work, and whether it's reading books, they listen to podcasts, they sign up for programs, they're going to retreats, they're doing whatever. And maybe the people they're dating or their partner or their family or whoever is not doing the level of work. And so the feeling superior comes from literally thinking they know more and they know better, and they might. But again, it's like what we were saying earlier, but what's your behavior indicating? You're still behaving. You're still doing the low-level behavior of, let me jump into the situation that I wasn't asked to jump into. Let me try to control this thing. Let me take responsibility for you. It's big.
But it is. But let's talk about what is the fallout from doing it. Is that two things. One is that you are just pouring your life force energy into another human being.
Totally.
Which means that all of that life force energy that you actually need for your own life isn't there. Hence the resentment, the martyr syndrome, all of the things that come from all of this overfunctioning for other people.
Yeah, because you think you can't not do these things, right? Like if I don't handle this person's emotional storm right now, I don't know what they might do.
Yep.
And the thing is, where there is a lack of willingness and I'm not willing to find out. So I remember early on when you and I started talking about this, you gave me this analogy of it's like a parent who says their kid won't take a nap. And the thing you said is, listen, you're just not willing to close the door and let the kid cry. The kid will go to sleep eventually, right? And that's not an abusive or whatever. It's like the kid will stop with the temper tantrum after a couple minutes, right?
Yep.
And just because it's an adult, it's not any different. The adult will stop with whatever is the kind of temper tantrum. It's actually our unwillingness to allow others to have their own experience that is the biggest form of the high functioning codependency.
Yes, but let's talk about the why of that, because it's important, which is that it's not you, grown-up you or grown-up me, who's unwilling. It's the 6-year-old who is so afraid because she still has a child's fear, and children's fear tells them that maybe someone's going to die, or like maybe the house is going to light on fire, or maybe like a child's fear is very different than a logical mind of a grown-up fear. And so part of why it's so threatening to draw that boundary and say no is that because it's the kid who has not been handled, who's not been honored, who's not been dealt with, who is losing it, you know?
Yes. And so that makes sense. And again, when you're super intelligent or conscious or whatever, you're not registering that little kid fear because you're not willing to claim something so, we'll call it unevolved or whatever, where you think you're beyond where you are emotionally or in your fears or whatever. You don't realize that was really unconscious for me. Like when we got to the root that it was a 6-year-old who was scared. And again, like I keep saying 6, we keep saying 6 because like that was literally the age for me. It may or may not be for you listening, but it was like, oh, that makes so much sense because it's like, it becomes like mortal fear of like mortal danger. And a lot of people I know, I talk to a lot of women who like their thing is abandonment. And it's fascinating. Like literally, would you rather be in these constant situations of having to deal with and just like you said, pouring your life force into someone else, not having it available? Do you know how many women I have with these amazing goals and dreams? At the time we're doing this interview, the applications are coming in for my mentorship program, Emerge. The things that my women want to do in the world are amazing. And when I ask about all the other categories of their life, specifically non-romantic relationships and relationships, and some of the things that I'm seeing are going on, I get it now because I see how I was doing it too. And it's a miracle. For many of us, part of the not being able to see it is because our capacity anyway is so freaking high. So we're still getting so much done.
Yep.
Like you said, it's like, there's no way I could have this deep underlying thing. We have no idea until you do.
Yep. And the thing is, the thing that's missing when you're functioning at that level and you know something isn't right is the joy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll tell you guys, I don't mind sharing this. In my recent relationship, I got to a point where like everything in my life was humming. And there was one thing consistently thieving my joy. And this is not about blaming the person. This is about the choices I was making, the things that I was saying yes to constantly that I wasn't okay with. And it was really eye-opening for me because this is what I teach and this is what I do. And this one category, because I had that unmanaged 6-year-old, I couldn't see it. I wasn't seeing it. But that was the trigger finally to be like, this thing cannot be making me so unhappy while all these other things are going okay if everything with me is fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example of being able to say something is not right.
Yeah.
And I really need to look in and see what it is. And you guys listening, even if you're afraid of the thing that isn't right, you know what? You don't have to do anything this moment, not today, but being in denial of it is going to really rob you of your life. So you can know it and say, okay, I'm going to handle this one baby step at a time, because maybe it is that you need to get out of the relationship you're in. And maybe down deep when it's just you and you actually know that. What I'm saying is that nobody's going to make you do anything, but finding out about yourself is it's such a valuable experience regardless. Yeah. And then the changes can happen naturally.
Yeah. And this is a cool thing because, you come from a family system, whatever was the family that you grew up in, whether traditional, non-traditional, blended family, whatever it is, foster family, adoptive family. And I say this to people all the time, and it's so important. I just wrote a Facebook post about this morning. You're not just healing for you. You're healing because some people feel like this kind of work, it's like so self-indulgent. Who am I to spend this time? My kids need me, or like whatever. Yep. And by you doing this type of work for yourself, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically, you really are freeing other people. You are
without a doubt
not only setting an example, but like it's so wild. It never ceases to amaze me how we do this work and then the people around us start showing up differently because we're, to go back to the dance, we're not doing the dance anymore. It's not even available.
Yep, exactly. Done. It's over.
It's over. The
Which
song
is so great
done. Cut the record.
The vinyl is off.
The vinyl is off. Scratch the fucking record.
Exactly. So what else are we going to talk about?
Well, here's the deal. We're getting ready to wrap up, and I don't, normally when we're getting ready to wrap up and there's still so many things I want to talk about, I feel like anxious and I need to squeeze it in. But because we have our webinar coming, I don't feel that way. And honestly, the webinar is like 9 days after this interview goes up. So people can listen to this, soak it in, maybe listen a couple times, and really have some questions. Bring your personal questions to the webinar. Tell us about your specific. We're going to leave plenty of time for Q&A. Check out, Terri, you'll have to remind me, what day is your course actually become available for enrollment?
It is going to be right after the people on the webinar, if they want to, will be able to enroll. Okay. I think it's opening up mid-January and it starts on February 1st.
Okay, cool. So we won't give a link yet to go there. Or actually, if you're listening later, we'll make the link. If it doesn't work, it's because the course is not available yet. But if you go to untameyourself.com/real love, okay? And again, go to the show notes because we're going to have the link to sign up for the webinar or to check out the course. What were you going to say?
Right. What I was going to say is that, but here's the thing. You're going to have people where they can, and you will provide this, we can provide this, be joining if they're not already in the free Facebook group. Like there's so much stuff that's already happening.
We're going to have links to all the things at the show notes page. untameyourself.com/episode-147. And again, you guys, this was a different kind of episode in that Terri's been here before. So this was less about her and more about diving into these nitty gritty things that, it was shocking, so humbling for me to be here, to be doing this work, to be able to help so many other people and still not be able to see some of this stuff in my own life. This is why we need coaches. This is why we need mentors, why we need therapists, why we need all these incredible people in our lives to see the shit that we can't see yet. And then also to hold us through the experience of it hurts. It's not easy. Do you know how many, me crying on Skype with Terri is a normal, regular occurrence in my life. The way we started out, I'm like a Pavlov's dog almost. I see Terri, I cry. I'm just kidding. But, she's great at this. And I also want to say this. So you just sit there and you take this for a moment because I need to talk about how great you are again. I've had a lot of women come to me who have worked with therapists for years and years and years, decades and decades. And the thing is, they're still talking about the same stuff. And this is what's important. The behavior has to change. And literally, a month after starting my work with Terri, 2 months after, 3 months after, shit is different. And that's what's important. The same types of situations are presenting themselves to me, and I am different. I can respond differently, and it's a response, not a reaction. Because when you're in that place where it's the unconscious stuff that's controlling you, you're reacting to everything. You're not able to respond. So being able to respond to things now, to be able to see them now, to be more in that observer place, and to not be getting jerked around by a little 6-year-old who's dying for some adult to friggin' take care of her, is a really amazing, beautiful thing that I'm forever going to be grateful for. And, like someone said to me today, it's going to help, it's going to serve my own life for the next 30, 40, 50 years. It's going to serve you all for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And I have to give so many props to Terri for being an absolutely integral person on that path for me. So check out all the things. Terri, is there anything you want to share to close out? even though we know we have our webinar coming and we're going to get into a lot more stuff?
I'm just so grateful. I'm grateful for your community. I'm grateful for you doing this work and getting it out there to so many people, which is so amazing because you're in it right now. I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that it's accessible. I'm grateful that people's lives are changing because we need all you people in your highest form, like doing the work that you're meant to do in the world. And you can't do that if you're not mentally healthy.
Totally. Yeah. And that's what it is. It's mental health. So yeah, I call it the transition team. We're on the transition team, you guys. We are helping the masses get healthier, get happier. And especially as us, the show's all about reclaiming, redefining womanhood for the 21st century. And now more than ever, we need to be fully showing up, right? Not just badass at work, not just great at being a mom, but really showing up in all the ways, especially for ourselves. So again, I'll tell you one more time, all the show notes at untameyourself.com/episode-147. You can sign up for the webinar there. You can get links to a bunch of other things Terri mentioned during the chat. This chat is not over. It's going to continue on January 11th on that webinar. So I hope to see
excited.
Many, many of you there. Terri Cole, I love you, and we'll talk to you later. I love you too, honey.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
And I think we live in the information age, or apparently live in the information age. And I think that needs to change. And I think we need to move from information to knowledge, from knowledge to wisdom, and wisdom to awareness. The problem is we don't stop long enough to allow the information that we're consuming to move into a place of knowledge, never mind wisdom, and forget about awareness most of the time. And you know why? Because we're too busy running to the next book, and we're too busy running to the next podcast, and we're too busy consuming. And a lot of it's driven by insecurity. It's driven by a scarcity. It's driven by, shit, if I don't read the latest, greatest book, I'm missing out. It's a fear of missing out. And what that shows to me is that I'm not comfortable in my own skin. If we did nothing else and had 5 books in the bookshelf, and reread each of them every year and implemented one thing, as long as it's organic and it speaks to us. There's too many people out there going, oh, Joe Blogs, who speaks on the stage, who has a podcast, who's written 25 books, says this is the 5 steps to living the perfect life. I adapt the 5 steps to living a perfect life, and I wonder why it doesn't work. And then I look in the mirror and go, oh, I'm the problem, I'm broken. The problem is you've adapted 5 steps from somebody else, and you haven't filtered them through your intuition, your gut, your soul to say, does this actually, I don't give a shit what Richard Branson has for breakfast. Does this fit for me? And I use the breakfast one, not to have a go at Richard, I've met him a number of times, is because there was an article literally recently, 6 months ago, here's what famous people eat for breakfast. Almost implying that if you have granola and Korean ginseng and olive oil or something like somebody else does, you're going to get the same results. And we're literally not sitting back and going, okay, great, that's what somebody else has. But does that resonate with my body? Does that resonate with my soul? Does that resonate with who I am as a person? And filter everything you hear through the filter of who I am as a man or a woman on this earth.